I don't know how your instructors do it, but I don't differentiate between heritage tourism and cultural tourism, because they're really basically the same. So I don't differentiate. So if you're wondering why I keep saying heritage tourism, it basically means the same. So heritage is not only about the big and the marvelous things. It's about the commonplace, the vernacular, the ordinary heritage. Okay? And that's what I mean by the democratization. Democratization means you take it from the few rich leaders at the top and you bring it down to the everyday person. And so I think that we need to rethink about what heritage is from a more democratic perspective and say, heritage is about everybody. Each of one of us has a heritage. I have a heritage. You have a heritage. Okay? And that should be important to you. And so that affects what language you speak, what religion you practice, what food you eat, the holidays you experience. That's your personal heritage. So heritage is not just about big and marvelous historic sites. Everyday heritage and landscapes are also important. Can we sell all of them to tourists? No. Should we sell all of them to tourists? No. Should we value them? Yeah. I don't think so. And there's a lot of places in the world. I've talked to people in India and Israel and other places about this. They say there's just too much heritage. We have to choose. We have to choose the big heritage because we can't save all of it. And that's true. But you can at least try to save representative elements of it. Okay? So heritage is not only about ancient. We also have new heritage. Something built 2 weeks ago is heritage now because we inherited it from the past. That's why I say even the casinos in Taipa are some form of heritage. And Professor David Weaver in Australia wrote a very interesting paper about Las Vegas, looking at the fact that tourism and gambling are the heritage of Las Vegas. So tourism itself is now the heritage of Las Vegas. It's sort of a unique way of looking at it, but it's this kind of heritage I'm talking about. Okay? So it's not just about ancient monuments, but newer heritage is important. We have to repeat all of that. Heritage is not only about tangible artifacts and buildings. We always think of buildings. Why do we think about buildings? Heritage is so much more than buildings. Because you can put buildings in a brochure and a website. You can touch buildings and you can take tourists to tour buildings. You can't really take tourists to tour a piece of music. So there's a difference there. Okay? But intangible heritage is equally important, if not more important in some ways. Because, for example, last year, I read an article, it was a sad article. One old man, he was 95 years old or something like that. He was the last man in Scotland who could speak one dialect of the Scottish Gaelic in a small valley. He died. The language disappeared. Gone forever. They have some recordings, but nobody knows how to speak it now. This happens all the time. So that's important heritage. And of course, UNESCO is trying to help with the intangible heritage elements of their goal as well. Okay. Shifting markets and demand for cultural heritage in the Western world. We're starting to see people are valuing the Western world. I'll talk about this in the Chinese context in just a minute. But we're starting to see the Western demand change to value the everyday life of the peasants and the farmers and the women and the children, etc., who've basically been written out of history in the past. We're starting to see a little bit more change to that. So I'll bring this to the Chinese context because some of you have heard of China before. So, at this conference in Luoyang, there was a guy from Spain there presenting, and he's doing some research on Chinese tour packages in Spain. And he's surveyed all of the outbound travel agencies, not all of them, but a lot of them from China, and he's analyzing the tour products that they offer. And something interesting, and maybe you can relate to this. that all of them offer the exact same product. Isn't that interesting? The same tour circuits, the same visits, the same historic places, the same museums, even the same restaurants, because the Chinese typically need to eat Chinese food. So there's interesting things going on. And what that means is if a tour company decides that it wants to diversify a little bit, it will lose business. Because the Chinese market isn't interested in other heritage. Okay. Because the Chinese market is so new to the world and so big that in the Chinese mind, well, we have to go see this place and this place and this place. And so now, at least for one more generation, maybe, then these companies that offer these Chinese tour packages in Spain, they basically have to offer the same products. So, for example, there's a place in the United States, I host a lot of Chinese visiting scholars. I've had 20 in the last couple of years. And when I see them and they come to visit, the one place they always have to go, every Chinese person must go in the United States, Yellowstone. I don't understand it. I still don't understand it. I've asked them about it. And they say, well, because it's the most famous national park in the world. And it's the first national park in the world. And in the textbooks and in the Chinese media, we hear about Yellowstone. And so they have to go to Yellowstone. If you ask Americans, they don't know anything about Yellowstone. They know about the Grand Canyon, or maybe other places, but Yellowstone is not at the top of the list. But for Chinese, it is. So if an American Chinese tour operator decided to offer a package without Yellowstone, that's like committing suicide, right? They won't get the business because the Chinese demand a trip to Yellowstone. I'm generalizing, of course, but that's the basic pattern. So this guy from Spain said the same thing, because the Chinese have to go here and here and here and here and here and end in Barcelona and come back. So maybe until Chinese are on their second or third or fourth trip to Spain, then maybe they'll go different places. It's not just Chinese. I'm picking on Chinese because his study was about Chinese. The Chinese are such a new market that they tend to do that. But typically, when we start seeing, even as individuals, when we travel, we want to see the Great Wall at Dallen, right? We want to see the Eiffel Tower. We want to see the Colosseum in Rome. But then if we go back to Rome next year, maybe we don't need to see the Colosseum. Maybe then we can start seeing more ordinary heritage. Because all of us are humans, and we have that tendency to want to see the iconic heritage places. And those, as we all know, are the tangible, the big, and the ancient. And then if we have subsequent trips, like for me, I haven't been to Macau since 1994. So Aaron yesterday took me to, where did we go? The typical places. St. Paul's ruins, I had to see it again. It's older than last time I was there. Macau Museum. So we went to the old administrative center, the UNESCO, right? And so I'm the same way. I wanted to see those because I haven't been to Macau since 1994. It's really changed a lot. Like I said, St. Paul's is a little bit older now. But, so we have these different patterns that we have to, so my point is it's not all that easy. There's a lot of different patterns we have to watch out for. So everyday common heritage should also be considered as we try to plan tourism or how to plan and promote heritage. Okay? So, I've already kind of talked about that. Okay, so what can be learned? I would challenge all of you, even if you're, let's say, for example, in food studies, maybe you should focus on heritage perspective. Because that's a really, in tourism studies, that's a new thing. People have studied food for a long time. For speaking from a services management perspective, but when we're talking about the context of food, the story of food, that's a new way of researching food. That's a very heritage way of researching food. Heritage is everywhere. It surrounds us at every turn. We should, as individuals, as educated individuals, appreciate what's around us, okay? And see it for what it is, okay? It's not only located at special places. So there is a new heritage demand. It's quite small still. But we're starting to see that this desire only for extraordinary heritage places and experiences is diminishing. And that could come with subsequent visits or repeat visits, that sort of thing. Okay? So maybe tour packages can start to include more ordinary heritage with the big heritage. So that's one way of understanding and appreciating that. Now, as I mentioned before, UNESCO has a few programs, like the intangible heritage in our declaration. These are things that are trying to, because UNESCO is a problem in this. UNESCO has created part of the problem. Because the 1972 convention focuses on ancient, tangible, and great. Okay? And that's wonderful. But UNESCO also, since then, in the 1990s, began to recognize the error of its ways. And now says, not all heritage is, what's the word? What is the word they use? What's the word? The word they use is universal value. So not everybody, not all heritage is these great places. So they're trying to sort of catch up and say, now they have the intentional music, food, etc. part of it. As I mentioned before, places with a long history of human habitation have a problem with heritage, and that is, what do we choose? We can't protect everything. We can't interpret and sell everything. We have to be able to choose the best of the best. But maybe they need more representative samples of all elements of heritage. With this idea of popularizing heritage to include everyday landscapes and art, ordinary heritage, I think is really important. And it may create a bigger need to protect and promote as well. So, getting back to my original two goals. My one goal was to get you to think beyond the normal box that we think. I hope I succeeded in thinking that, and I haven't said anything new here. I'm just trying to reconceptualize what we've been trying to conceptualize for many years. So we should be more open-minded about what cultural heritage is and what should be protected and or promoted in tourism. But we need a lot more research to know how ordinary, intangible, and new heritage can complement existing other forms of heritage. So there's your goal, students. I'm going to come back in 6 months and all of your research will be done. Can I say one more thing? Oh yeah, I have a few minutes. So as we were coming in here, how many are you, all the students, are you undergraduate students or are there master's students also? All undergraduate.
Some master students.
Some master students and PhD. I know just PhD. I would challenge you, and if you're undergraduate students, if you're choosing to go on for graduate, for master's and PhD, when I get students coming to me to work with me, I really encourage them to think big, to be creative. I'll give the story we were talking about up here. I had one student come from Fujian, and she came to me, and she came to my office and said, we met, and then 2 weeks later I said, okay, I want you to produce a list of the research topics that you're interested in. So she produced a list of 5 topics, and the first one was ecotourism in China. And I said, why do you want to research ecotourism in China? And she said, well, it's big, everybody's doing it. And I said, that's the wrong answer. Get out of it. No, I didn't say that. I said, that's the wrong answer, so that means you shouldn't do it. That really confused her. And eventually we went through several of her ideas. And then the very, very bottom was red tourism. And she said, oh, it's really stupid. Nobody likes tourism. It's small scale. It's only for party members. It's not an important part of tourism in China. And nobody's really researching it. And I said, now you're going to be a specialist in that. And that's why you should research it. But there's no literature about it. Good. That means you're going to create the literature about it. So that's what I mean by thinking big. Don't just do whatever. And then a week later, we talked about methods. And she came to me and said, oh, well, I'm going to do structural equation modeling. And I said, why? Well, because that's what we do in China. I said, this isn't China. I said, why do you want to do structural equation modeling? Because that's what we do. I said, that's not what we do. That's what somebody told you to do. I said, how well do you know structural equation modeling? And she said, very well. I said, then you should choose something you don't know. She was shocked. I said, I challenge you to take 2 or 3 courses in qualitative methods and learn how to do that. I said, you're very good with statistics, right? Yes. Then don't do it. Because you already know how to do it. Education should be a growth experience. Don't just do what you already know. If I know how to sweep the floor really well, I should wash the dishes. My wife would love it. But, so that's my challenge to you, is think big, think broad, and don't do what everybody's doing. And this is what I talked about in Luoyang too. Be creative in choosing your research topics, and choosing your career options. Okay? Be creative in the methods you choose to do your studies. Not every problem needs to be solved using SEM. And so there's other ways of thinking. So I encouraged her. Now her name is Zhao Shunnan. She's in California. She's a professor in California now. Has published many great articles about red tourism and other things. And so it's really about challenging ourselves. And in this presentation, I'm trying to challenge you to think not just about castles and cathedrals and great walls, but to think of cemeteries and villages, and children and fences and barns, because they're all very important part of heritage. Nobody's researching them. Why? Even though it's 99.99999% of human heritage, we should be more willing to look outside the box. That's my soapbox. I'm finished now. So, anyway, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.